Hello everyone, my name is Kayla and I am a violist at the Chicago College of Performing Arts at Roosevelt University. As a recipient and participant of the Research Fellowship Program, I would like to present a comprehensive analysis of some common treatments for performance anxiety in musicians. As a musician with years of experience in the music conservatory and professional performance environment, I have observed the manifestation of performance anxiety in both myself and my peers. In conducting this research, I hoped to open up one of many conversations about performance anxiety so that myself, my colleagues, and performers of the future can have a foundation of information to serve as a point of reference. I personally struggled with performance anxiety for years before gaining any control over it, and I continue to work through it in every concert. It is a subject often touched upon in performance-based classes, and something that nearly every person will experience throughout their lifetime. Whether you are dealing with an upcoming recital in Carnegie Hall, an audition for your dream orchestra job, or a performance in front of your family and friends, the information I have for you should serve as a great starting point to recognizing and coping with performance anxiety. I will begin by addressing the issue of anxiety as a general experience, and some of the most prominent indicators of the disorder. Discussions about anxiety have become increasingly more prevalent in Western culture, and we learn exponentially more about causes and treatments as time moves forward, with more specific studies. Allison Woodbrooks, assistant professor of business administration at Harvard Business School, characterizes anxiety as a state of distress and/or physiological arousal in reaction to stimuli, including novel situations, and the potential for undesirable outcomes. Under this definition, we can recognize that the presence of anxiety can often lead to a lack of control and result in unsatisfactory consequences. There are two different types of anxiety. Much existing research surrounds trait anxiety, referring to an individual's proneness to experience anxiety in any given situation. Trait anxiety also involves the presence of state anxiety, which is a transient emotion that anyone can experience. Both state anxiety and trait anxiety are intertwined. Trait anxiety is determined by the level of state anxiety combined with the propriety of a situation. In other words, trait anxiety describes your disposition before any stimulus occurs, and state anxiety describes a direct reaction to a stimulus. Everyone has some level of both, whether it be higher or lower, and the levels of state and trait anxiety in each individual will determine how well any given treatment may work for them. Now let's talk about what happens in the body when you are feeling anxious before a performance. Here is a quote taken from Managing Stage Fright, a guide for musicians and music teachers, by Julie Jaffe-Nagel. Biologically, the brain and adrenal glands produce chemicals in the body that are sensitive to stress. Common stress hormones include epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, norepinephrine, and cortisol, which function as neurotransmitters and hormones. If one experiences or perceives a physical or emotional stressor, such as performance anxiety, there is an increase in hormonal activity. Anxious performers become keenly aware of cold hands, shaking fingers, increased perspiration, lowered concentration, rapid heartbeat, and other physical symptoms. Blood flow is directed away from the extremities, such as fingers and toes, toward the larger organs, such as the heart. This flight or fight response prepares the body for battle, as though performance is a life-threatening experience. Now that we have a better idea of what performance anxiety entails, it's time to look at some potential known treatments. This semester, I sent out interview questions to professors at the Chicago College of Performing Arts at Roosevelt University, including these questions. I hoped to find a basis of information from the established professionals in my own community to find out how performance anxiety has been dealt with in previous years, as well as how some respected musicians overcame their own stage fright. The question that yielded the most consistent responses across the board was actually this one. Was performance anxiety discussed in your music schooling? If so, how was it approached by teachers and/or peers? In a group of 8 faculty members, 75% of responses independently indicated that performance anxiety was not openly discussed or addressed in their schooling. To try and open up the conversation to my peers and provide a resource for those who may not have conducted individual research on the topic, I am presenting a concise collection of methods and treatments for dealing with performance anxiety. I am going to start out with reappraisal of stress responses, followed by the Alexander technique, the balance of challenge and skill in regards to the concept of flow, and finally, Western medicine. Let's get started. Reappraisal of stress responses. In virtuoso performances, musicians often carry themselves with serene poise. It appears effortless, which leads young musicians to believe that it should be effortless. However, the truth is that nearly every musician will deal with some level of performance anxiety at some point in their career, often over the course of many years. The general act of emotional reappraisal has been proven to be more beneficial and effective than emotional suppression. Suppression merely masks the emotion from observers rather than confronting the source. Reappraisal deals directly with the experience as well as the expression of the emotion being felt. This results in less cognitive, physiological, and interpersonal damage. Teachers and mentors will sometimes suggest focusing on calming down when feeling nervous before a performance. It seems logical that this could be the only way to deliver a sufficient performance with full focus. Much focus in research has been placed on the reappraisal of anxiety as calmness, which has improved results as compared to suppression of anxiety. However, there may be an even better approach to this issue. In a study conducted by Allison Wood Brooks of Harvard Business School, data suggests the importance of arousal congruency, or the consistency and relevance between a person's emotional state with the circumstances being experienced. In other words, it may be more beneficial to do less in order to achieve more. If we consider the presence of arousal, or performance anxiety for the sake of this study, and the presence of calmness to be on opposite sides of a spectrum, it can be reasonably speculated that there lies a state of being within the spectrum that is closer in distance to the arousal that would be more feasible to achieve in a high-stress situation like a performance. With this theory in mind, Brooks turns our attention to the method of reappraising performance anxiety as excitement, a state of being more closely related to anxiety, as they share many physiological symptoms. So how do we reappraise our anxiety? Dealing with performance anxiety using this tool can be as simple as saying to yourself, "I am excited," before a performance. According to Brooks, important work in positive psychology suggests that happiness in life comes from the frequency, not the intensity, of positive versus negative emotional experiences. Next up, we have the Alexander technique. The Alexander technique is a unique approach to performance anxiety, as it can also help with many other physical challenges performers deal with throughout life. Some of these challenges include unnecessary tension, muscular or joint pain, technical performance issues, and of course, performance anxiety. The Alexander technique was developed by Frederick Matthias Alexander, an Australian actor and reciter that struggled through many years of health problems. One of the greatest threats to his career was a struggle with hoarseness following performances. This became a chronic issue that was not properly addressed by voice teachers or doctors, which prompted Alexander to take on the issue himself. He observed his own habitual behaviors in front of mirrors and experimented with different approaches to performance in an effort to change unhelpful habits. In doing this, he was able to treat his hoarseness and advance his performance career. The Alexander technique requires the performer to look inward and reflect upon both good and bad habits. By bringing awareness to the entire body, the performer may discover long-held habits that actually cause pain or discomfort. Once habits are identified, a performer can use the technique to establish new habits that are conducive to a successful performance. In the context of performance anxiety, the Alexander technique is a hands-on approach. In a statement by certified Alexander technique instructor Jennifer Roig-Francoli, "What I have learned with the Alexander technique is that fear that constitutes performance anxiety is largely the fear of actually feeling those strange sensations that arise in the body." She encourages students to become curious about their own bodily experience, as a scientist might be curious about something outside their own body. While the world of Alexander technique is quite vast and cannot be summarized in this single video, Jennifer Roig-Francoli provides a step-by-step guide to using the Alexander technique to relieve performance anxiety, which might give some good tools to start with in approaching the technique. Step 1. Imagine that you are about to give a performance, if that is not the present reality. Step 2. Ask yourself, where are you right now? Where are you in space? Where is up, down, left, and right? Step 3. If you're not actually anxious right now, remember what it feels like. Step 4. Realize what the feeling of anxiety feels like in different parts of the body. The way you usually deal with the discomfort is to try to do something to get them under control. Step 5. Make a conscious decision to do something different in response to those feelings this time. You're going to not do the same thing you always do. In order for those feelings to change, you will simply allow these feelings to be there, giving yourself the freedom to feel them first. Step 6. Choose one sensation that is especially present and get curious about it. For instance, think, this is really interesting. I wonder what's going to happen next. Step 7. Tell yourself what it feels like. For example, I feel my heart pounding really hard. Step 8. Do any thoughts seem to go with this feeling? Example, I can't stand this. I wish it would stop. Step 9. Gently notice any thoughts and stay with the feeling for just a few moments, without trying to make them go away. Don't try to relax, move around, or do anything else. Just stay with the experience you're having, finding it interesting, and letting it be uncomfortable. You'll survive. Step 10. Is there another feeling that seems to want your attention? Gently shift your attention to this feeling. Get curious about it, go back to number 8, and repeat the process as often as you like. This process can be very helpful if you are dealing with any level of nervousness or anxiety before a performance. It is very helpful to practice the process several times before it is actually needed, so that once you have a performance, it's already familiar to you. Next, I want to introduce you to the concept of challenge-skill balance and its relation to the state of flow. According to Clive Fulliger, flow is an optimal and positive state of mind during which individuals are highly motivated and engrossed in an enjoyable activity. By finding the balance between the challenge that a piece of music presents and the skill level of a player, a musician may more readily experience a state of flow, distorting the passage of time and eliminating external distractions. Once this skill has been developed, it can very well be applied to public performances and perhaps in the treatment of performance anxiety. This model shows that there is a sort of sweet spot where the level of challenge and the level of skill align to create an optimal performance. If the challenge is too low for the skills of a musician, this will result in boredom or lack of arousal. If the challenge is too high for the skill level of a musician, it will result in high anxiety. A study was conducted by Clive J. Fulliger, Patrick A. Knight, and Heather S. Sovereign to track the relationship among challenge skill balance, flow, and performance anxiety in 27 student musicians over the course of a semester. Their findings suggested that performance anxiety spikes when there is a discrepancy between perceived challenges and the skills necessary to carry out a performance. The great question now is, how do we achieve a state of flow in a performance? To provide a greater sense of how to do this, we can discuss the core elements of flow as well as the preconditions of flow. According to Fulliger, the core elements of flow include absorption, or an intense concentration and involvement in the task, enjoyment of the performance of the task, and intrinsic motivation, or if the performance of the task is motivating in itself. These are all elements that need to be present in order for someone to achieve the state of flow, and they make up the foundation for its definition. There are three main preconditions of flow. 1. The perceived challenges of the task or action opportunities must match the skills of the person performing the task or action capabilities. 2. The task must have clear and proximal goals. And 3. The task must provide an individual with feedback concerning how well they are doing and the extent to which they are achieving the goals of the task. If we consider all of these core elements and preconditions, it may be feasible for musicians to use this knowledge to greatly reduce performance anxiety by working toward the balance of these things when choosing repertoire for a recital. Finally, we must consider the option of Western medicine for treatment of performance anxiety. Many musicians turn to different medications to treat the physical symptoms of performance anxiety. This includes something called beta blockers. Beta blockers are a classification of drugs that prevents androgen hormones from releasing and stimulating cardiac action. In the form of atenolol and nadolol, under the brand name Corgard, they are often used to treat hypertension and angina along with some other heart conditions. According to the Mayo Clinic, some more common side effects of atenolol are blurred vision, cold hands or feet, confusion, difficult or labored breathing, dizziness, faintness, or lightheadedness when getting up from a lying or sitting position suddenly, shortness of breath, sweating, tightness in chest, unusual tiredness or weakness, and wheezing. It is important for every person to do their own research before taking any new medication, and a discussion with your primary physician is necessary in making the correct decision for your health. While beta blockers are an option in treating performance anxiety, it is entirely possible to work through performance anxiety using tools aside from Western medicine. I hope this video helped you to understand some helpful ways to deal with performance anxiety. Of course, research on anxiety is continuous and ever-changing, so there's always new information to guide performers of all disciplines. Whether it is the reappraisal of stress responses, practicing the Alexander technique, achieving flow, using Western medicine, or some other technique, it is important to remember that performance anxiety is a part of every performer's career. In pursuing this project with the Office of Student Research at Roosevelt University over the past 2 semesters, I have learned a great deal about myself as a performer and as a scholar and the information I found, and in the way I have decided to present it to you today. I found that performance anxiety is not discussed to the degree or with the consistency to be conducive to a successful performance career as a person struggling with it. On the other hand, I found that there is a wealth of information and studies conducted on the subject available to many student musicians with just a bit of extra research. I hope that this video will serve as a foundation for inquiring musicians so that they can begin their own research on treatments for performance anxiety. A teacher of mine used to say, "If you aren't nervous, you don't care. If you don't care, you shouldn't make music at all." Nerves are an important part of any performance. Gaining and maintaining control of these emotions gives us great power. Thank you.